Welcome to the Collecting Keys Friday Focus.
What's going on, guys? On this episode of the Collecting Keys Friday Focus, we have a slight change of pace. And instead of our typical, kind of monologue episode on a specific topic, we are sharing with you an interview that I recently did on the Real Estate Maximalist Podcast. So this is Alan Corey's podcast. So if you listen to our episode that came out on Monday, you heard Alan's story. He is a real estate investor who's been around for a long time. He runs a really good show of his own. And I did an interview over there about a month ago. And I thought it was just kind of a great representation of my backstory, which is something that a lot of people regularly ask me about. So we decided it would be a cool change of pace for our Friday show to bring his episode over here. So you guys can kind of hear me from a little bit of a different position as a guest rather than just as a host all the time. So anyways, guys, I hope you enjoy it. You should definitely go and subscribe to Alan's show. He runs a really great show over there. And let me know what you think. If you like these kind of show shares like this, there's something that we could potentially do a little bit more of. If you don't like them, let me know that too. You can let me know that by sending me a DM on Instagram at Mike_invests. But besides that, guys, enjoy the show. Regardless of whether you like the style or not, I do think that this is a great show that he puts on, and you guys will get a lot out of it. So thanks for listening, everybody, and enjoy my time guesting on the Real Estate Maximalist.
Welcome to episode 92 of Real Estate Maximalist. Are you looking for motivation? Need that kick in the butt to make your next move in real estate? Well, today's the episode for you. When most people try something new and fail, they don't want to try again, let alone say heck with it and stay the course and then fail multiple more times. But today I'm joined with Mike Dehaan, who has failed his way to success. Mike left his job with no backup plan and then spent the following 2 years learning and studying real estate before launching a wildly successful business that has now replaced his previous income. Stay tuned to learn that stumbling right out of the gates is just part of the process. I'm your real estate and wealth building coach, Alan Corey, at Real Estate Maxi on Twitter. Over a span of 23 years, I've built a portfolio of 350 doors, am a top-rated realtor, and the author of 3 books, including $1 Million by 30 and House Fire. Each week, I send a newsletter with my favorite wealth building strategy. If you sign up for the newsletter today, I'll also send you a free ebook and property analysis calculator. Go to realestatemaxi.com/newsletter. And now, let's get to the show. Mike Dehaan, thank you for joining us on Real Estate Maximalist today. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Appreciate you having me on.
Let me pick your brain here, Mike. How did you get into real estate?
I got into real estate kind of a roundabout fashion. And I think like a lot of people that we talk to on my podcast are just like in the real estate sort of investment sphere. They typically have some sort of background in it, at least like a little bit. Or, I mean, I guess for perspective, my parents, they owned a house, but they never had a mortgage, right? So they bought it like a long time ago, back when, you could buy stuff for cash that was relatively cheap. They kind of lived in the same house my whole life and before that. So the whole process of like real estate as an investment and leverage and those sort of things wasn't on my radar. Growing up, I had kind of a traditional upbringing. I went to college. I got an electrical engineering degree. I did that for about 5 years and I decided that I didn't like it. I wanted something different. And I quit my job in 2018 with no real plan. I kind of just like pulled the ripcord and, gave up 75% of me and my wife's income because I gave up my engineering salary to just go and figure it out, and started learning about business and wealth generation and all these sort of things, because all I knew was that I hated being an engineer and I didn't know what exactly I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to be self-driven, self-employed, and have more control of my future. And over a few years, I kind of just dabbled in stuff, but the reoccurring pattern that came up again and again across, different business books, wealth books, passive income, the FIRE movement was real estate and passive income, right? Like rental properties and those sort of things. So as a result, I started getting into real estate, like so many people do, reading books and going to meetups. And ultimately, as I tried different things, I got heavily interested in real estate, I guess, once I started to sort of see the potential and how it would be an opportunity that I could develop kind of myself locally without having to have like a super fancy product, like if I could e-commerce or like a really strong marketing plan or things like that to start. But it was something that I could literally go and I could rely on other people, realtors, wholesalers, whatever, and I could start generating passive income and wealth for myself. So the barrier to entry seemed significantly smaller to me than some of the other, I would say, like guru-ish endeavors out there that people tend to push when it comes to wealth and freedom, right? So
Yeah, I love that. And so what was the first property you bought?
it's funny because I was at that time, I'd quit my engineering job. I had some savings, but I had no income really. Like my income was coming from working at a gym as a weightlifting coach and driving for Uber. And so I was super risk averse, right? So I wanted stuff that was easy. So I found some houses that were local here in my market in Spokane, Washington, that were actually like new builds. And I kind of analyzed them with a view of, like the 1% rule. Like I knew that I could rent them for 0.75% of what I was going to be able to purchase them for. So it wasn't 1%, but they were safe because they were new. So I liquidated my old corporate 401k, paid all the penalties. What I actually did was pretty foolish because I could have rolled it over into a self-directed IRA or things like that and used that money. But, I had a decent 401k from having a strong engineering job and investing in that diligently, doing the corporate thing for 5 years. So I liquidated it and I went and I bought 2 single family turnkey properties. So, my total down payment on that was like $70,000. And I put all of my money into those thinking that I was just going to be able to start getting a decent cash flow return on it. But of course, I failed to account for vacancy, property management, basic, maintenance that would occur on the properties. Basically, my view was my monthly payment is going to be $1,200 a month. I'm going to be able to rent these for $1,600 a month. I'm going to make $400 a month per property. That's $800 a month. That's already almost as much money as I'm making per month from my other 2 gigs. Like that's going to be a pretty sweet investment. And I sort of learned that that's not obviously how things work.
All right, newbies, what did Michael do wrong here? That's right. He didn't budget for maintenance, repairs, vacancies, capital expenditures. So it's going to be tough to just say, I rent this for $1,600, my mortgage $1,200, I'm going to make $400. It doesn't work that way. Typically, 35 to 50% of the rental income is just going to go to expenses. Then you got to look at the mortgage payment. Kudos to jumping right in and getting started, because I think a lot of people know that, but they never buy a property. So with this quick learning, how did you pivot or adjust or continue investing?
I immediately learned that wasn't like the best decision because it ate all of my capital like right away. Like I still had, my emergency funds and that sort of things because I used that 401k almost exclusively to buy those properties. But I realized very quickly that if I wanted to keep buying, I wanted to keep investing, I needed more capital. So I was, interested in the real estate space at that period of time. I was getting very involved in the local community. So I was like, well, what do people do when they are, needing to generate capital in the real estate investment space? They start flipping houses, right? If you're not a realtor, if you're not doing it for your job. I didn't really have an interest in becoming a realtor. I decided I'm going to flip houses. I didn't have any money, but I did have time and I had some gusto and some hustle to get things done. So going to different meetups and connecting with people on forums, I ultimately found someone that was in the opposite position of me. Okay. They were also new, but they had the money and they didn't have the time or the hustle to get things done. And we basically just connected and said, cool, we have equal goals. We both want to generate more capital to invest, but we need to sort of figure out how to do that together. And so we decided to partner up and start flipping houses. Our first sources of house flip deals were coming from REOs. So we're looking at bank-owned properties. We connected with a realtor here in Spokane that was selling bank-owned properties. About a month after I met this person, we bought our first flip together, which was an REO property. A ton of stuff that I didn't know when we went into it. Like I didn't even think to notice the fact that there was no HVAC system, or the fact that the plumbing and like the water system hadn't been winterized properly. So, we bought it in the middle of winter and we went and we turned on the water and immediately all of the pipes burst, right, in the entire house. And we had to redo the plumbing. So it was a huge learning lesson and like all the stuff that you need to, inspect when you're getting into these properties. And after about 5 months of super hard work, so many trips back and forth between my house and this house, negotiating contracts, doing all this sort of stuff, we were able to flip the house and I made a whopping $4,000 as my share after 5 months of work, but I got a great education.
All right. I know you're thinking, I know, Alan, I know I need to get a home inspection. That's obvious stuff. But this is the main point that I want to focus on right now. He didn't have money to buy real estate. So he just sits back and waits. No, he goes to a meeting and says, I need to find someone who has money. I promise you, if you are sitting there thinking, I need money before I start in real estate, there's just as many people out there that say, I have money, but I don't have anyone to invest real estate with. There's equal problems. You got to go meet people, introduce people, say you're a real estate investor. Find those partners. They're out there. I promise you. I love that you mentioned that because it's the education component that a lot of people quit after that, right? Like it's, you bought two houses that weren't cash flowing as much as you thought, a flip, a lot of work, hustle, a lot of surprises. You came out $4,000 profit. Why did you say, let's do more of this?
I'm a little bit of I was like a trial by fire person. Like growing up, I've always had different situations like that were just, I guess like whenever I faced challenges, I would become obsessed with like, how can I use this to grow? Whether that was like in sports or in school, I missed out on an opportunity or something, I got cut from the soccer team, whatever. I would say like, how can I use the challenge that I had here to get better at my next attempt for it? And I took the same approach when it came to this house. So with that house, for all intents and purposes, like almost everything went wrong that really could have in the deal, right? The way that I viewed it, I was like, well, the next one can't possibly be any worse than that, right? I mean, obviously it could have for sure, but the viewpoint I had was like, that was almost a worst case scenario. And that was really, I guess, like emphasized to me when I would tell all the things we went through on that property to like some of these other people that I'd flipped a lot of houses. They were like, wow, I have never had that same situation before. So you really went through it on that one. And so we decided like, hey, let's just see what happens going forward. And so we took that money, they were able to recover all their capital. They made, the $4,000 split too. And we just went and bought another house that we went through the same process. We were much more efficient. It was much cleaner. And at the end of that one, I ended up making about $28,000. And that was when I guess I started to get the bug a little bit more and realize what the possibilities were. And then with them, I went on to flip two more houses, bought a couple more units with the proceeds that I was making. I didn't keep any of that money. Almost all of that money I went and put right into other rental properties that I was looking at. With that, the flip proceeds I was getting, I bought two properties myself. At that point, I had some credibility with a local hard money lender, so I was able to get funds. I bought a duplex and a triplex with my flip proceeds, both of which were BRRRR style properties. So I bought them from wholesalers. They were discounted and I was able to refinance out the entirety of my money after they were done. And after that, I had a little portfolio going and I was kind of off to the races at that point, I guess, with the full like real estate bug. Now that I had these properties that were basically getting infinite cash flow because I had no cash that were left in the deal. And I was starting to make actually a little bit of money from the flipping and the rental income that was coming in.
And the reason they had no money in the deal was through the BRRRR method?
Exactly. Yeah. So, if you're unfamiliar with that, basically you buy the property, you repair it, you rent it out, you refinance, and you repeat. It allows you to keep using the same capital over and over and over again. And I was able to do that because I bought them at a discounted price from wholesalers. And then I was able to increase the value of them by doing repairs and fixing them up and getting them rent ready. And then in the eyes of the bank, they were worth more than what I bought them for. So when I refinanced out the money, I was able to recover all of my capital.
One of the best strategies out there. What's it like working and buying from wholesalers?
So it obviously depends on the wholesaler. Wholesaling is one of my main businesses now as I've sort of started to scale and I started looking for better deals for myself. But back then, wholesalers, it's a tricky thing because it's kind of like working with a realtor in the way that they facilitate the deal with the seller. They work with you on both sides, but the difference is, they're completely unregulated and the barrier to entry in most states to being a wholesaler, pretty much like, do you have a deal? Like that's all it is. There's no licensing, there's no education, there's nothing involved. So pretty much anyone can go out and get a property under contract and wholesale or assign that contract to somebody else. And they make their money in the middle and they only get paid if the deal closes. So I was fortunate in the way that my first two properties, I had a good experience. Right? Some people, they'll buy things from wholesalers. They don't know how to do their underwriting. They feel like they get ripped off. They overpay for the properties, all that sort of stuff. So my first two properties, I had a good experience, but that did give me a false sense of security because in the third property I bought from a wholesaler, this was actually right before I started going off market myself. I definitely was on the other end of that where the wholesaler did not disclose things to me appropriately. I had a lot of red flags that came up during my due diligence in the process that I ignored because I thought that I was the smartest one in the room at that point since I'd done, like 4 deals at that point. So as far as I was concerned, I was an expert. And I ended up ultimately fast forwarding quite a bit after I bought that third deal. I ended up losing about $25,000. So point being, working with a wholesaler, they can be great if they're good. It can be terrible if they're not. But either way, you need to make sure you're doing your own due diligence and, looking at the property yourself and not taking their word for it.
Is a wholesaler required to disclose anything?
No, absolutely not. Like a good one will. Like if they are in it to be in the business for a while and they're not trying to make a quick buck, they should disclose things to you, but you still need to do your own due diligence on it regardless. Because also too, I guess as a wholesaler myself, we shifted over to a direct to seller model, and as a result started wholesaling a lot of properties. We've done coming up on 200 now in the last 2.5 years. But a lot of the time we aren't incentivized to do a super deep due diligence, and B, because we are doing such high volume of transactions, there's stuff that we just don't even think about, if that makes sense, right? So you need to make sure that you're looking at everyone as much as you can. So, listen to them, but I would say trust but verify whenever you're working with a wholesaler.
What was the $25,000 hit on the one that went south?
It was actually the first solo flip that I took on by myself. So I had my partner, and at that point, I started buying rentals. They moved to a different part of the state. So we basically just parted ways mutually, which is fine. They moved on with their life and I moved on with mine. So I bought this property looking to flip it to generate some more capital. And as I was going through it, it was a big house. It was a larger project than I had ever taken down before. And as I was going through it, right before closing, I was using a hard money lender. And they were like, hey, listen, man, this is a hard money lender I used a couple times. They're like, hey, listen, I don't think this is a good deal. Like, you shouldn't buy this. The comps of the after repair value are not there. Like, I think you're going to get yourself into trouble. And I was like, I don't know. Like, this wholesaler seems like he knows talking about. And so I went and told him that I didn't know if I was going to be able to move forward because my hard money lender wasn't into it. And he goes, oh, I got a better hard money lender. Your guy just doesn't know what he's talking about. Connected me with his hard money lender, right? Who was like, yeah, absolutely. I'll fund the deal. Won't even think about it. And I was like, perfect. So my guy just was ignorant. The guy that I trusted on 3 deals, he just doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't know this neighborhood. I'll just use this other hard money lender who, I'm sure had some sort of referral fee that he paid the wholesaler. He robbed me on fees up front. He did all this sort of stuff. And ultimately, I trusted people on the process who were only fully incentivized to get the deal closed, right? And I ignored the base due diligence. And then in that too, I did a full inspection on the house, which isn't common with wholesalers because of the big house. They let me do it. They had a bunch of red flags that I was like, I dealt with worse on the first house where I only made $4,000, so it'll be fine. And ultimately there was red flags from several experts along the way. And due to my own, I would say stubbornness and ignorance, it just led to me losing $25,000 after it was all said and done.
That's painful to hear. I'm sure it was painful to go through as well. But I admire you to just say, hey, I got a $25,000 education. If I quit doing real estate, then I lost money. But if I continue to do real estate, I'm not going to make that mistake again. I'm going to get better at this, and I'm going to make 30,000 on the next deal or whatever it is. I think that's where a lot of new real estate investors quit if the first one goes sideways. And to me, it's like, listen, you'll go pay $100,000 in college tuition, and there's no guarantee that a job is there waiting for you. A job's going to pay you, but you believe enough that, I will be able to pay off this student loan. That's sort of like you're getting a real estate education in real time. It's cheaper than a college tuition. And you're just saying, hey, I lost money, but nothing. You don't learn better than losing, right? Like losing money is the most valuable lesson, more so than success, because you know exactly what you did wrong. But sometimes you don't even know why you were successful, and but you just keep doing it and hoping and praying it works again. I love that you just kept moving forward, and didn't give up. That's the attitude. This is a long-term business, and you're living it. So congrats.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think what you said there is super valid that's when you learn your lessons. And I think that's a reason too, that so many people that got into real estate in, late 2020 and 2021 are really struggling right now, because back then it was impossible not to win, right? With how hot the market was. Like if you were buying any deal, you could make money, but that's not the reality. Right. And so when I started, the first rentals I bought were in late 2018, bought the house flip shortly after that. So, that was before the market started getting a little bit crazy. Things were still, if you went and listed a house, you expected it to take 60 to 90 days to sell. Like that was sort of the normal expectation. Stuff was underwritten a little bit more conservatively and all those sort of things. But from when I started to that loss that I took, that was only 14 months. So I started moving really, really aggressively. And once you know the process, you start to make basic connections, you can scale up Yeah, like your ability to scale up is limited purely just by your own willingness to work a lot and the connections that you can make to get things done, whether that's from deals, from money, or whatever that looks like, right? And ultimately, because I guess I had that momentum in my growth that started growing very, very quickly, the fact that I had those losses, I was like, I just got to be a little bit quicker on the next one to be able to keep functioning. So
You've taken this experience, this buy-in from wholesalers, doing the deals themselves, and you turned the off-market house hunting into a business. Is that correct?
Yep, exactly. So after that last situation with the wholesaler where I lost money, I started going to these meetups kind of right before COVID that I would say they were like kind of like the higher level meetups. So one of the wholesalers that I bought one of the first properties from was putting it together, and it was for the people that they knew were actively buying flips and were doing deals in town. And I was like kind of like an invite only sort of thing. So I went to that, it was like pre-COVID, and a lot of the discussion was about the virus that was going on, and it was starting up in China, and like the economic impacts that were going to happen. Things are starting to get weird. Nothing had shut down yet. And so the premise of this was, okay, how are we going to be able to, all of us as like the core people in this town, be able to really capitalize on this? Let's create a little mastermind. And at that point, I felt, honestly, like a bit of an outsider, just because there's a lot of people that I knew were very active in the market. But a lot of the people that I knew them by name, I knew they were active. I met them and I was like, I can be this guy. Like, this guy's definitely not any smarter than me. Like, he just has a different strategy than I do. So my main takeaway from that was like, how can I start to be that source of deals? How can I start to like do what these guys do and find the deals myself? My primary focus when I started was that so that I could find better deals. I wouldn't have to pay a $25, $30,000, $40,000 wholesale fee to somebody, right? Because I thought like I could generate that, that income for myself.
I just want to quickly explain the wholesale process, what it is. You find a property off market, someone at church, someone in your neighborhood. You go knock on some doors. You make them an offer. So let's say the house should be $100,000, but a wholesaler with their charm and negotiation skills gets it under contract for $50,000. They can go assign or wholesale that contract for whatever cost that they want to. They can assign it for $60,000 or $70,000. They keep the difference of the $50,000 purchase price. When Mike says he pays a $30,000 wholesaler fee, that's because someone brought him a house and says, hey, this is a $100,000 house. I'll sell it to you for $100,000. Okay, it's worth it to me. He doesn't know what the wholesaler got it under contract for. So that is how the wholesaling game works. And Mike decided, I'm going to be in that business instead of buying from those wholesalers and flipping the properties.
So I went and partnered up with my college best friend who was dabbling in real estate a little bit too, and said like, hey, let's start this business. And beginning of March in 2020, we decided to go off market and start marketing direct to seller ourselves. And as with everything, it turned out it was much more difficult than we thought. We joined like a mastermind group that was national, and we started building out a business process and learning how to pull data and market and determine who was distressed sellers and do this whole thing, run a sales process. It took us about 5 months to get our first deal. At that point, we were about $30,000 in the hole. When we got our first deal, I think I was down to like $12,000 in my bank account. So we were getting a little bit desperate, and I was relying pretty heavily on my business partner's funds. We got our first deal and we needed the money. We needed some money back. So we assigned it to another investor for a $7,500 fee. And then I learned another lesson because they proceeded to vacuum the carpet and put the house on the market. And I think they made about $85,000. So that was another lesson that I learned there of trusting people.
Well, is it trust, or did you just misvalue the ARV?
It was that. And it was a little bit of trust because also too, when these guys, they knew that we were getting into this business. I'd connected with them a little bit. And when we first brought them the deal, we tried to get a $15,000 fee. And they were like, I don't know. I just don't think it's a deal at that price. Like, we could pay this. And they basically cut our fee in half. And we were desperate. So we're like, yeah, sure, take it. And then they would have still made a killing if they hadn't done that. So we were like, again, it goes back to doing your own due diligence on stuff as much as you can. So anyway, though, that first one gave us a little bit of momentum. I still remember when we got that deal assigned, me and my business partner, we were standing outside in the yard of another property. And I was like, oh, we just got it. We just made this money. And we like literally like, jump high five, like Anchorman style in this yard. We were so pumped. And then obviously all that unfolded. But then the next month we got 3 more deals. that we got signed around and we assigned. I think we grossed, about 40,000 that month. That was I guess that would have been in August of 2020. And then in October, things really started to take off. We had our first 6-figure month. And that's when we knew that we had something super serious going on.
Wow, congrats. Is this through SEO, Facebook ads, cold calling? What? Hey, everyone. Before Mike shares where he's getting his business from, I wanted to take a moment and thank our sponsor, Jasmine Mortgage Team. I've worked with Jasmine and her team for over 10 years, done over 15 of my own personal mortgages with her. Go and get a free mortgage quote at jasminemortgageteam.com today.
Yeah, so it's direct mail. It was how we started, and it's been our core for the last several years. We pull distressed seller lists from just public data that you can get pretty much anywhere. The system that we use is called PropStream, which is a very common one that people use. We just go and we look for, absentee owners, so basically landlords. We go and we pull lists for people that have filed bankruptcies, have liens on their properties, or going into pre-foreclosure, all the typical things. And we send them letters, and it's nothing that's super complicated. It's very standard. We just focus on sending high quality letters. And as we've built out, what's given us the competitive advantage is that we have a brand that's behind it so that we look more credible than other people. And it's just doing that consistently over time. And that's given us a very consistent source of deals over the last couple of years.
And those sort of things take 6 months before they pay off. So a lot of people quit before then as well. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. That's what I always tell with anybody that's looking to get into off-market real estate, regardless of if you want to put the capital into direct mail, you want to sit on a cold call dialer yourself, you want to try to build out a SEO lead funnel online, whatever it is, you need to expect it to take at least 3 to 4 months before you start to get a return on it. And I think one of the challenges people have is when they go into that realm, they focus on getting contracts, when what I always tell people now is, if you're looking at that, focus on the progress that you are making through, the conversations that you're having. Are people actually reaching out to you? Are you being as consistent as you think you are with your follow-up, with your lead generation processes and all those things? And if you have improvement in those as you go month by month, you're getting more leads, you're having good conversations, you're following people like you're supposed to, you are building a rapport with sellers, it's only a matter of time before you're going to be successful. It's not really an if at that point, it becomes a when very, very quickly if you're taking the strong active steps.
So in these letters, are you making offers in the letters? Are you saying, reach out to us, we'll make an offer? And then when they reach out, you're making an offer on the phone. Walk me through the offer process here.
Yeah, so it's super basic. This is from Ballpoint Marketing. They have a envelope that stands out. And it's important that you send stuff that looks like legitimate mail, because not everyone knows this if you're going to do mail. But everyone's post office zone has a day where the post office delivers everyone's junk mail. So if you're sending cheap postcards and things like that look like junk mail, you'll get lumped into that. And you'll show up with the stack of coupon catalogs and all those other things that people get that everyone just throws away, and you won't stand out. But if you send an envelope, that is addressed from a person, has their name on it, this will show up with their mail on the good days when they aren't getting a bunch of spam, right? So that's key number one. And then within the letter, we give ourselves a brief introduction. We keep it simple. We say hey, we're a local real estate investment company. We always try to mix in something that is slightly local to the area in terms of something that's happened recently. So let's say you had a heat wave, it's middle of summer, you just had a heat wave. You say, hey, Mr. Seller, I hope that you were able to survive those 105-degree temperatures. Definitely not our favorite situation. Anyways, we're a local real estate investment company. We're interested in buying your property at 123 Main Street. Can you please call or text us at this number? We would love to speak with you. And I want to emphasize the call or text, because having that call to action be specific is more important than you think as you go through it. And it's really that simple. And we just do different iterations of that over and over and over again with slightly different custom tweaks depending on what's going on in the local market to show that we are actually aware of the area.
Okay. And then they call you, and then you sort of your line of questioning, you kind of ask about the condition of the home, their situation, how fast they have to sell, what they owe on it. And you kind of get your due diligence on the property and the seller. Is that correct?
Yep. And so the key with distressed, working with distressed sellers, is they're all calling you for a reason. Okay. So we actually try to make the property itself kind of the last part of the conversation. Because at its core, what happens when you get into direct to seller marketing, very quickly it becomes more of a marketing and sales business as opposed to a real estate business. So the things that make you successful are better marketing and sales systems, and basically your collateral, your payment is the real estate, right? Whereas a lot of people, they get into this business and they focus on the house. So they have somebody who you don't know why they called you, okay? And you go to them and you're like, okay, well, your kitchen needs to be done, your roof needs work, all this sort of stuff. We got to fix the plumbing. This is what we can offer your house. But they never thought to ask about why the widower is calling you for this distress, from the situation. Like, what is her situation that she decided to reach out to you versus going to a realtor or giving it to her kids or doing something like that? When people call in, the conversation that we typically have is like, okay, how come you're not looking at listing the property? Then they'll sort of like give their general motivation, like, oh, I'm getting divorced. Oh, I just need to work. Okay. What sort of timeline are you looking at to get out of this property? And then that'll sort of give you a little bit more on their situation, whether it needs to be ASAP. They're like just sort of floating around ideas, that sort of stuff. And then, why did they choose to like reach out to you from your mail? If you ask that, it's like some people will say that, oh, I looked up your company. That sounds good. Some people will say I'm looking for an easy option. But typically when you get through those three questions, so like, why are they not using a realtor? Why do they choose to reach out? And what is their general timeline and their expectation with the closing? Naturally, after those three questions, people will start to tell you kind of the details about what they're going through. And from there, you can make better decisions about how to actually help this person through their situation and how potentially buying the house could assist with that. And then from there, you say like, okay, great. So I understand now you've listed off all these issues. Selling this house is going to either reduce your liability, okay, or it's going to give you capital to be able to solve whatever problems you're going with. Let's see what we can pay you for this thing. Then from there, you go through it because now they feel like a person instead of like a transaction where you're just focused on their asset. That is probably for most people, the largest piece of any sort of property that they own, right? Is going to be their house.
It sounds like you started this as a way for yourself to find leads, and then you're almost a problem of success. You had too many leads that you can buy, and now you've become the wholesaler yourself. Is that right?
Yep. So that's a huge part of our business. Going back to what I was saying before about when we got our first deal and we decided to assign it. Like I had no money left to buy anything, so we needed to assign it. And even then, we only made that $7,500, and then we still had marketing overhead for the next month. So we needed to start generating some cash. And honestly, after that first month where we made 40 grand, you start to get a little itchy for that, right? You're like, this is some serious money I can start to put in the bank here. So we started to lean heavily on wholesaling for the first little bit. And then what we did once we had that lead generation process, we had strong opportunities that were coming in. Me and my business partner, we kind of defined our buy box. We said like, this is the cash flow that we want. This is like the type of property that we're interested in keeping. This is the different neighborhoods and all that sort of stuff. And from there going forward, every opportunity that came through, if they didn't hit that buy box, then we would just go and we would assign it and we would add that revenue to our to the bank, right? To be able to do and buy more properties in the future as they came through. And so like, we just basically decided to keep the properties that fit our box and we would wholesale everything that didn't.
And where's your portfolio now?
Sitting on about 55 units right now. It's I think 28 or 29 individual properties that we've bought, consisting of single family homes, duplexes, a couple of triplexes, and an 8-unit.
And so at this stage, do you find yourself being more of the wholesaler or acquiring properties, or it really depends on the deal by deal basis?
As interest rates have changed, obviously doing like the BRRRR method. So that's the other thing too, I'll say is with everything that we kept, we would still try to get it at prices where we could refinance out all of our money. So we didn't really do a lot of fix and flips. We would do like fix to rent. That's kind of been our main models. If it's a fixer upper, we're going to keep it. We're going to go and we're going to fix it up to started to keep it for long term rather than to sell it, right? Mm-hmm. So as interest rates have started to get super high, that isn't as possible as it was before. So now instead of just having like our buy box where we'll keep everything that fits that, it mostly comes down to, can we get a debt structure or a deal structure that makes sense for us to be a long-term hold that we would be interested in holding. So we've started to get more into creative financing, seller carries. We've done several carries over the last little bit of properties that we bought that they fit our buy box of what kind of properties they needed to be, but then we were able to negotiate a seller finance term that made sense for us. And then we've started working recently on a couple of different sub 2 purchases that are, similar sort of thing where we're buying people's debt that's at like 4%. And even if we're having to bring a little bit of money into it to, keep locked up for a short period of time to get them money so they can get out of their deal in a comfortable way, we're willing to do that at this point just because we have the revenue generation to be able to park some cash like that.
If you don't know, seller financing is basically you buy someone's house, but you can't get a mortgage for it for whatever reason. So the seller says, hey, I'll give you the mortgage. You don't have to pay me all the money of this $100,000 house today. Why don't we create a mortgage and you pay me $2,000 a month until it's paid off, just like a normal bank would. That's called seller financing. The second thing is called subject to, and that is saying, hey, I want to buy your house and the mortgage that comes with your house. This requires a lot of legal finagling, but it's fairly common. You basically say, move out of the house. Don't tell anyone. Keep the mortgage in place. I'm going to make your mortgage payments to make you whole and pay you a little bit for your house. And that way you can lock in and keep that wonderful 4% interest rate that's already there. This just comes back to creative financing and meeting the right people, asking the right questions, trying different angles. You don't need money to buy real estate. You just need to not quit. This is great. Is this a two-man shop or you have systems with VAs and automations? Yeah. And how can you kind of walk us through the setup?
My actual wholesaling team is 7 people right now. So it's me, my business partner, 3 VAs, and 2 sales guys. We do the wholesaling in a bunch of different markets around the country now. So as we started to scale, we kind of maxed out the return on investment on our marketing in our local market of Spokane, Washington. And it got to the point where we could keep trying to spend more to squeeze out more and more deals. But ultimately we said, like, what if we just took our same system and we went into different markets and we tried to catch the low-hanging fruit in these other markets, right? So that's what we did. So been in 12 different markets. We're currently active in 8. We dropped out of 4 of them because they just weren't a good fit for us, doing exclusively wholesale in all of them. And all of that's managed by our 4 VAs and our 2 sales guys. And then for our buy and holds, we're still primarily looking here in Spokane because that's where all of our properties are. That's where we know them. We're just taking that wholesale revenue and applying them towards deals here in the Spokane market.
If you had to start all over from everything you've done from scratch, the single families, the new construction, the partnerships, what would you do differently now that you're educated? Because you got your education on the fly, right? What would you do differently?
The main thing I would do is I would focus on learning skills to generate rapid income, massive income, as opposed to passive income. Like, this is something that I've become, so I guess, somewhat passionate about. Is you look at like the financial independence space, right? Or like the wealth building space. So much of it is focused on, this is how you calculate how much passive income you're going to need to like leave your W-2. And this is sort of like how you can go about buying assets to do that. This is the things to look for. And I understand in theory why it's like that. It's kind of like a conservative, safe viewpoint of looking at it. But the argument that I always make for people is, honestly, I think it's easier, in my opinion, from like having done all this, it's honestly easier to make $1 million than it is to replace like a decent W-2 with truly passive income. Like, honestly. So like right now, my passive income from my rental properties surpasses my old engineering salary, my old wife and I's household salary. But I also own 28 properties, right? So like that's a huge step to get there versus I made my first $1 million in revenue, like my personal income was in 2021. And that happened way before I had 27 properties, right? And that was also while building that portfolio over that period of time. So there was revenue that I could have generated that I left on the table. So what I tell a lot of people when they're looking at like financial independence and being able to generate wealth, have like a plan for how you're going to generate that investment income, that passive income, but focus on the skills to get that massive income, which, is honestly typically sales and marketing and learning to network with the appropriate people. Instead, because like if I had done that from the start, I wouldn't have taken my $70,000 that I could have gone and turned into an incredible amount more and put them into 2 turnkey properties that just ended up being parked there for a really small amount of money at the end of the day.
So you would take that $70,000 and go to networking events and masterminds, or?
Yeah. So I joined a group, I would, if I'd put that towards marketing to sort of learn how to wholesale back then, I would have been able to go into that at a much higher caliber. I would have probably started flipping houses with that money instead of bringing on a partner where I was giving up half of it. There's a whole different medley of ways you can take that money to like grow it much faster than going and parking it into an asset where you're going to make like a tiny bit of return at the end of it. Especially like if your only income is through a W-2, which most people's W-2s, unless you have like a sales job or something that's commissions based, you can't speed up how fast you get that money. So, it's going to the fast of like increase your income as much as you can, and then you can increase the velocity of that income, once it's sort of coming in and it's stabilized. The biggest thing too with off-market stuff is it's not rocket science, honestly. Like so many people, they get dazzled by like the Instagram folks who have like the high production value, and they're talking about like these crazy systems and all this sort of stuff that they're building. And like, this is how you have to be an expert at subject twos, and you have to spin all these complex things and whatever. If you just have a basic process that's super consistent over time, you can start to get traction. And then honestly, what it comes down to grow, it's learning how to systematize it. But once you sort of understand the basic process, or even if you don't, like there's so many people out there that are willing to coach and teach you how to systematize things, and don't feel like it needs to be this huge, super complex thing to compete with the people that have been doing it forever, because it really doesn't. You can have a really basic process and go and get deals if you just have some intention and some longevity with it.
If people want to learn more about you, reach out, what are some ways?
I have my own podcast. It's the Collecting Keys podcast. We talk a lot about the business side of real estate and off-market real estate. It's me and my business partner. We host it, and we do 3 episodes a week. CollectingKeysPodcast.com. It's a great place to, hear more long-form stuff from me. And then if you want to reach out to me directly, the best place is on Instagram, which is at Mike_invests. And don't be afraid to shoot me a DM on there. I'm always happy to chat with people. One of my goals for 2023 is to do an Instagram post every day that brings value to people. So I'm pretty active on there these days.
Mike Dehaan, thank you for joining me today. Follow Mike_invest on social media and listen to his Collecting Keys podcast.
Thanks for listening to this Collecting Keys Friday Focus. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts.